Welcome. Welcome to week 5 of PSHS 6240 here at George Washington University School of Professional Studies Homeland Security. Just starting off with announcements. The Adobe Connect session was this Thursday, Group 2. So Group 2 is in the chute. Please get your slides to me that day on Thursday. Please tell me what topic you're going to do at least the day before so I have an understanding of where you're going with that. But again, Group 2 is in the chute for this week. And the link is the same one I sent for the first group. It's my personal room, so you have it in the announcements for this session. And then paper 2 is due a week from today, or depending on when you're watching this week, on Sunday, 11:59 p.m. And again, if there's issues, please let me know ahead of time so I can account for that. So paper 1 overview. Everyone's got their paper back. Most of all did a good job. Again, I want to emphasize this, that I grade harder for the paper. No one's going to get 100 like you do in the discussion sections. So I want to make sure that's clear. And the second thing is, I just want to make sure the commentary I make, I owe you. That's part of your tuition. So you're owed improvement. You're owed my thoughts. You're owed where I thought there was kind of weakness in your argument. Don't take those personally. There's weakness in the arguments of all the readings that I give you, that I assign you, even though some of them are written very well and are some of the most important scholars in a terrorism field. But everyone's going to come up short in some way in their argument. So again, don't take this personally. And again, of the 400, 500 students I've had, I can count on one hand where they've had a major issue with the grade, or they had a major issue with my comments, and I think it went to a point that it got disrespectful. So if you have issues with the comment, please don't hesitate. We can talk on the phone. We can work something out. But again, don't take my comments personally. Everyone got comments and inline notes about their argument. So just again, some of the issues that jumped up, far too much background. And I wrote this on most of the papers. Get to the point. Don't need to talk about what happened at Fort Hood. Don't need to talk about what happened at Orlando. I know it. If it's part of your argument, get to the argument right there. So that's an issue. Do not repeat definitions. There was people repeating what the definition of the FBI is, what the definition of CIA was of terrorism, the definition of the Department of Defense was, and it seemed to be filler space. I know what filler space is. I've read hundreds of these papers before, and I know when you're doing it. If you have a problem filling up 5 pages or 1,500 words or 1,800 words on this topic, you have not given it its appropriate thought level. And that's kind of partially a failure on me, partially a failure on you for this issue. Criteria. I gave... maybe I should stop giving the example paper out. I do not want you to rip those criteria out from the example paper. I wanted you to come up with your own criteria, and I gave you lists of what you can choose from for each one of these scenarios that I brought up. So make sure the criteria is, pin your argument on the criteria. And then in the rebuttal arguments, a couple of people did do this, a lot of you did not. You say your rebuttal arguments, but rebut the rebuttal arguments. Show the weaknesses in your rivals analysis, for lack of a better term. So make sure that's outlined forward. And then there's passive voice. This is always an issue. People think they know what passive voice is, and then I know a lot of people don't. What passive voice is, so everyone's clear, this is the first sentence is passive. The ball was bounced by the boy. The boy is the subject of the sentence. Bounced is the verb. Ball is the direct object. You want subject, verb, direct object. I don't mean to sound like your 8th grade English teacher here, but a lot of people don't understand that concept. What I do when I'm writing for leadership, I actually go down every sentence and every word like I'm in 8th grade, and I label it. subject, verb, direct object, indirect object, preposition. And the reason being is I want to avoid passive voice. I also want to limit the prepositions in my reading so it doesn't take away from the overall narrative. I go into that level of detail when I'm writing for senior leaders. So that covers the paper. Again, if there's issues, let me know. Week 4 review. And again, terrorist adaptation. I saw your discussion points so far. The question I bring up is, will ISIS be successful in this second round? In the first round, they were defeated, but as you saw in some of your adaptations, other groups were on the ropes or essentially knocked out, but they came back. And that's what I also want you to think about going forward. What are the variables for success? I think a couple of you noted this. Someone who did Hezbollah, I can't remember. One of the key variables for success for Hezbollah was that they had a steady stream of financing from Iran. They never had to resort to criminal behavior. They never had to resort to extortion. They could always take the high road because they had money coming in. They had a natural income. That, I think, was a decisive variable for success for Hezbollah. What are the other variables for success? What were the political leaders? What decisions that they made that allowed the PIRA to be successful? What did Shinrikyo do that made them essentially to be a failure? And then, when are we seeing the schism? Are we seeing the schism in ISIS now? Are we seeing the schism possibly in some of these right-wing nationalist groups or right-wing extremist groups? That's a key point that you can try and identify if you're looking at this from an intelligence analyst point of view. Where are we seeing the schism, and where's the opportunity to actually exploit that schism? And then the next part was WMD terrorism, Dirty War, excellent movie. Again, it's realistic, everything from the use of dirty bombs to first responders to testifying before Congress. And that's kind of why I assigned the movie, even though I'm a little hesitant at assigning movies. And then you had the Shinrikyo case study. It's important to note that Shinrikyo is the only group that has used nerve agent. That's a non-state actor in a terrorist entity. And as I discussed, there's reasons why Shinrikyo was able to do it and Al-Qaeda and ISIS were not. And I want to highlight that because I'm old enough to remember, and I lived it. Many of you hopefully are old enough to remember the Iraq WMD case study. And why we went into Iraq for the fear that terrorists would be able to get all sorts of WMDs and create 9/11 times 100. And they would point, well, was able to do it. Why not ISIS? Why not Al-Qaeda? Why not these groups? And hopefully I've armed you with better analysis to look at these issues going forward. And then you had the Rajneeshi case study. Again, not all terrorists are what we consider terrorists or WMD case studies. Or groups that use WMD. In fact, the cultish views might be more likely to use WMD than some of the more traditional terrorist organizations. So paper 2, again, due next week, 1,200 to 1,500 words. 1,500 words is the maximum. Do not give me anything more than 1,500 words, excluding cover page and bibliography. Designed, again, to be concise. In the real world, you have to narrow down things down to one page, narrow down paragraphs down to a sentence, narrow down sentences down to phrases. I don't expect you to do a whole lot of outside research. I think I've armed you with a lot to go forward with the articles that I've sent. You might need to do a little bit of outside research, but no more than what you'd have to do in your day-to-day job if someone asked you to do this task. And then you have the 3 threat scenarios. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula at Ricin, Syria, sarin case study, and ISIS plague. I ask you to go back in time because some of these articles were written in 2012, 2015, as if you are in that time in 2013 and this issue comes up. And how it works in the real world, someone will read the article from the New York Times about Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Ricin, and then they'll turn to you and say, is this really a threat? Write a page, write a memo on my desk by the end of the day and tell me if I really need to worry about that. That's how the real world works a lot of times, that the decision makers are driven by what they see in the newspapers that affect them. I will allow you to, a fourth scenario, if you want to talk about COVID-19. I allowed Ebola to come up when I did this a couple of years ago when Ebola was in the news. I will allow you to talk COVID-19. You just have to give me an angle if you want to write your paper on COVID-19. Maybe explaining to a governor what the potential for COVID-19 impacts are. Maybe explaining to a state official, could terrorists use COVID-19 to exacerbate, various situation. I'll let you do that. Just get back to me if you want to go in that route. And then, is this a threat? Why or why not? How would a terrorist group produce, transport, and disseminate the material in there? So you have to get a little bit into the science to talk about the constraints and the limitations and potential opportunities of whatever material you're trying to put forth. So again, unfortunately or fortunately in this course, we have to keep going. We can't just give you a week to do a paper. So I want to, again, week 5 is terror or counterterrorism strategy. You have the readings, the Monar, Vinar, Evra, Zakaria, and the PBS Frontline on ISIS in Europe. Some of the readings are a little bit old. What I want you to do is look at them from a longer perspective. 4 or 5 years later, do these statements still ring true by some of these authors? That's what I want you to kind of analyze going forward. And the discussions, U.S. counterterrorism strategy and Israeli counterterrorism strategy brought up in the lecture and the readings. So with that being said, if there's questions or issues, let me know, and I look forward to this week's discussion.